One. Hello, everyone. It is Monday night. You're running with the Roads crew. This is the Roads to Liberty podcast. I'm your host, Token, joined by one of my co-hosts, founder of the podcast, Mr. Ben Backus. What's up, Ben? How you doing?
Doing great. Can't wait to have another podcast with you. I haven't done one in a while.
Yeah, I know. It's been a little bit. So we have a special guest for you guys tonight. He is the founder of the Future Freedom Foundation, and he is a candidate for president running for the nomination of the Libertarian Party in 2020. He is Mr. Jacob Hornberger. What is up, Mr. Hornberger? How you doing tonight?
Doing great. Good to be with you guys.
It's good to have you too. It's been a while since we had a high-profile candidate of your caliber on the show. So I'm glad that we could work this out and get you on the program. Now, first of all, you're going to be at the Iowa State Convention coming up in late February. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. Well, we'll probably see each other there because we're gonna have a table with Think Liberty there. So maybe we'll get the chance to talk to each other again in person this time.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, looking forward to it. My campaign manager's from Iowa.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Jake Porter.
Oh, Jake. Yeah, I know Jake.
Yeah, we know Jake.
Him and I ran for Secretary of State at the same time.
Oh, yeah? Oh.
Yep. I was in Nebraska. He was in Iowa. And Andy Craig was from up in Wisconsin. He ran for Secretary of State also. That was a good crop of Secretary of State people that year, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, Ben was obviously the weak link in that group. But not really, because he's the only one of that group, correct me if I'm wrong, that's actually elected representative. Right, Ben?
I am, yes.
You're the only one of the three that made it.
Oh, if you want to call that making it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully you can pull off the miracle yourself there. So the first thing I wanted to ask you to get this interview started is, what is Aleppo?
Yeah, I haven't seen very many of those around.
I haven't seen them around.
I think they're in the jungles of Africa, those Aleppo.
the Aleppo.
Well, that's why I saw Nathan in that when they asked that first question, it almost sounded like he asked Gary what Aleppo is. And
well, you see, that's the way I took it at the time. I walked into work early that morning, like at 6 a.m, and my colleague Bart says, "Hey, what do you think of Aleppo?" And I said, "Hey, what?" And I think it was really a trap that was set for Gary Johnson. That they used that alliteration to trap him, and unfortunately, Johnson didn't pick up on it.
Well, the media was treating Johnson like their buddy for a while, and once they realized that he might start stealing more votes from their anointed queen, they turned on him pretty quick. But
yes,
that's just the media for you. They'll turn on you at the drop of a dime.
Oh, they absolutely will. That's the crazy thing about the American media. They don't like giving any attention to libertarian candidates, and when they do, they love setting traps for us. So I guess a good place to go from here is the problem libertarian candidates always have is we get no attention whatsoever in the media. Now, in the case of Gary Johnson, that may have been a good thing if he would have avoided a little bit of media attention, because he fell right into their traps. But at the end of the day, if the libertarian candidate doesn't get any exposure, we don't get any votes, right? If we're not, if people aren't finding out about us, then we can't expect to have any good vote totals. You know what I mean? So if you're the Libertarian presidential nominee, how do you fix this problem of us just not getting any exposure?
I think it's a problem that just is inherent to the system. That most of the mainstream media are sharing the statist philosophy of Democrats and Republicans. They believe in the socialism, the interventionism, the imperialism. And so they're obviously going to ostracize a party or a movement that opposes the philosophy that they subscribe to. And so I don't think it behooves us to try to battle against that or plead with them or beg with them, please give us more media coverage. I think we just rely on our weapons, which are principles, ideas, and sound ideas on liberty, to go person to person through the internet, through word of mouth, through talks, speeches, through podcasts like this, and create an underground, practically like under the radar screen public opinion that suddenly just surfaces. I mean, that's what happened with the Ron Paul campaign. They were ostracizing Ron Paul. They were trying to belittle him, keep him out of the debates, not covering him. And all of a sudden, Ron speaks the truth and starts talking about liberty. And there's this tremendous surge of millions of people that are gravitating to him. And so it shows the power of libertarian ideas despite the press. And I think that's what I would aim for, is just keep adhering to libertarian principles. And I think that is what will attract people to our cause and our party and the electoral process.
Well, it seems that's kind of like what Trump worked with his. I mean, he was kind of a groundswell off the internet in the early part of his campaign. The Republicans were trying to shut him down, and eventually it just exploded. So I guess it seems far-fetched, but I guess it's a strategy it's actually worked before. Is that what you saw with Trump?
Absolutely. Your point's very well taken. And Trump presented himself as the anti-establishment candidate. And he that was reflected by his attacks on George Bush and lying the nation into the Iraq War and so forth. And he took on the establishment. He tapped the national security establishment. He at least said he was going to bring the troops home from these endless wars, that he was going to slash government spending. Now, he's betrayed a lot of these things that he said he was going to do. But yes, he postured himself in that sense. He was reaching out for voters that are sick and tired and disgusted with what he called the swamp. He was going to drain the swamp. Now, he's been enveloped by the swamp, but yeah, that's what he did. And I think it's a variation on what Ron Paul did.
Well, and at the time, at the Libertarian Convention, we were looking to be the anti-establishment. And, at that point, it looked like it was going to be Jeb and Hillary. And I think Johnson would have been a great third option there. But once Trump showed up and took all those anti-establishment votes, it was almost sunk at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Johnson and Weld were sort of trying to present libertarianism in a respectable fashion and trying to appeal to mainstream America and saying, hey, this is a nice little non-threatening philosophy. While Trump was over there saying, to heck with the mainstream and their philosophy and their ideas, I'm gonna break this whole thing apart in Washington, D.C. Well, the way I look at libertarianism is the radical nature of the philosophy is our greatest asset. I mean, that in itself tells people how much we're opposed to what's going on in Washington, to the systems of the welfare state, the warfare state, the war on drugs, immigration controls, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, income taxation. All the people need to do is look at our philosophy and our principles, and they can see that we're against what's going on in this country. So I think that you don't need to present yourself as a radical. You just have to adhere to libertarian principles, and people will get the idea that this is a very, very different philosophy, and one in a positive sense that would move our country to a much better direction, in the direction of liberty, peace, prosperity, and harmony with the people of the world, as compared to the death, suffering, and police state that we've got here in this country, thanks to both Democrats and Republicans.
Now, one of the things that I was really frustrated with Gary Johnson was the way he would water down libertarianism, because I guess he felt a need to de-radicalize it for a general audience.
Bake the cake, Nathan. Bake the cake.
That's not even what I'm talking about. I remember when he had a town hall, I believe it was on CNN, and an audience member asked him about the drug war. And she's like, Libertarian Party platform says that you want to legalize all drugs. Well, this horrible thing happened to my son where he overdosed and died. And Gary Johnson's response was, well, I wouldn't legalize all drugs, just marijuana. That's all I'm interested in. And I felt it was a missed opportunity to explain what libertarian principles are and the practical positive side effects that ending the drug war entirely would have been. Had you been in that situation, how would you have answered that question?
I would have said, well, yeah, I mean, drug addiction and drug abuse are really horrible things. There's no question about it. Society's been ravaged by drugs. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it should be a criminal justice problem. What happened to that man's son should have been a matter for the private sector, private rehab groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, narcotics rehab groups. But the fact is, people have a right to ingest whatever they want to ingest. And so I would have said, yeah, you got to legalize all drugs. This war on drugs has proven to be so destructive of our liberties and destructive of life. I mean, look at all the murders and gang wars and killings and police corruption and judicial corruption that have come with this thing. It's just a variation of prohibition. People died of alcohol, you know, in both before prohibition and after prohibition. Well, the point is that you got to end the war on drugs, and then people that have drug problems, like this man's son, he would be encouraged to seek treatment. He doesn't have to worry about meeting a narc when he's over there in a rehab center talking about his habit in case he regresses or something. But, you know, I saw this debate 30 years ago. I was on the platform committee, and 25 years ago, and I saw it then, where there was a movement afoot to water down the platform and hide some of our positions, because there were those that were saying this is costing us votes. And my position was absolutely not. Our platform is our anchor. This is protecting us from the candidates that are out there saying, well, let's legalize only marijuana, or let's have selective foreign interventionism. Let's reform Medicare and privatize Social Security. We need to adhere to our principles, because that's what attracts people to our cause, when they see that this is a consistent philosophy. So I favor the legalization of all drugs, not just marijuana. Get the government out of the drug business. It's just too deadly and destructive.
Well, what people don't realize is just because it's legalized on a federal level doesn't mean a state can't make it illegal within their borders, or even counties. I mean, there's still dry counties out there. You know, I think the federal government should just be creating a sandbox, if you will, for all the states to experiment in. So maybe legalizing drugs doesn't work, but there needs to be some states out there that can find out if it does.
Yeah, but I take issue with that. I mean, I think a presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party should really never hesitate to tell what the principles are. So yeah, we believe in decentralization. Let the states have the power to do this. But I love the 14th Amendment. I think that no state should deprive any person of life, liberty, or property. And I think that when we're talking about drug laws, that it's incumbent on us to let people know that an essential aspect of a free society is your right to ingest whatever you want to ingest at the federal level, state level, county level, or whatever, and that no jurisdiction has the legitimate moral authority to interfere with this. And I would go further. I would say, using the 14th Amendment, that the state should not be permitted to destroy liberty either, and that federal courts should enforce that restriction. It's like education. You know, the standard libertarian response to education is, we'll abolish the Department of Education and get the federal government out of the public schools. I think a libertarian presidential candidate should go further and say that a real free society is one in which there is a separation of school and state entirely at all levels of government, no compulsory attendance laws, no school taxes, no state involvement in education at all. I mean, that's our position on religion. You know, we would not say let the states experiment with compulsory church attendance laws. I think the same thing ought to be done like on education or drugs, where we're raising people's vision to what a free society really is.
All right.
So go ahead.
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, you mentioned you were in the party, 30 years ago on the platform committee?
Yeah.
When did you initially get involved with the party?
It was around 1990 or 91.
So what sort of difference do you see in the party from then to now?
I think the debate is still there. I don't see a whole lot of difference fundamentally, but what I've noticed is that the party is divided into two sections. There's the reform element, where they're willing to settle for reform of government programs like Social Security privatization, healthcare reform, like healthcare IRAs or something like that, healthcare savings accounts, legalize only marijuana, have selective government intervention in foreign countries only when our national security is at stake, reform the Pentagon, reduce military spending. I reject all that because it's not freedom. Freedom necessarily entails identifying infringements on freedom and then dismantling them. An example is slavery. I mean, suppose there had been a group of libertarians in 1850 Alabama that got slavery reform adopted. Less lashings, or let's say no lashings, 8-hour work days, better health care, food. Well, that would have been good for the slaves. They would have appreciated it, but it wouldn't have been freedom. And that's my beef. I think that what we ought to be advocating as libertarians is not reform. Leave the reform to the Republicans, the Democrats. We are not Republican lights. We are not Democrat lights. We are libertarians, and it's incumbent on us to talk as libertarians about what freedom is. And freedom means a dismantling of Social Security, a repeal of Medicare and Medicaid, a legalization of all drugs, the restoration of a limited government republic to our land as compared to a national security state. Bring all the troops home from everywhere, discharge them. Now we're talking about real liberty and the road to a really free society rather than to some warmed over reformed welfare warfare state. So I think that debate is still going on in this party. And what I'm doing is entering this race saying, look, the way we're going to achieve a free society is forget this reform business. Let's talk about what a free society really is, and let's try to raise people's vision in America to achieving that free society.
So what was your take on the whole, I hope it's done by now, but the Libertarian Socialist blip that popped up?
Well, I'm not sure I really understand it. I mean, socialism is the opposite of libertarianism. And so when I learned that there's Libertarian Socialists, I really don't know what that means. Unless they're talking about a commune where everybody shares, which really isn't socialism. That's just a commune where people are sharing their goods in common. I mean, if socialism was where you got the state initiating force, either through the nationalization of everything, the means of production, or the results of production, or taking money from one group of people to whom it belongs and giving it to another group through force. I don't see how libertarian and socialism can be combined in the same term.
It was so bizarre, but I'll give it this much. It was great fun getting to boo a commie in person. I mean, I don't think I ever would have got that opportunity anywhere else.
Well, it was fun because there were two elements to that whole thing. There was like the legitimate communists, and then there were people who were just talking about voluntarily aiding one another. Those are the two factions that were in it. And the straight up commies, those guys, they just left the party. We got a comment from Kyle Varner who says, "You're also irrelevant if you talk like that." You have a response to that?
Talk like what?
Like, I guess like a radical.
Yeah. Well, define irrelevant. I mean, Ron Paul wasn't irrelevant. He made a major impact by talking about liberty and abolishing the Fed. I mean, imagine that. Where would you ever think that a mantra like abolishing the Fed would get so popular and just take the country by storm and cross over into the Democrats and the liberals and so forth? It was phenomenal. And when Ron talked about bringing the troops home because they attacked on 9/11 because of what the U.S. government had been doing over there, killing people. I mean, that's when his campaign took off. And look, the only control we have is we advance ourselves in speeches and articles and presentations. And we are libertarians. I mean, we have to be true to ourselves. It's very possible that people will study our philosophy and say, well, no, we reject that. Okay, so be it. Nobody guarantees you success in life. But if you start denying your essence, if you become like a Republican or you become like a Democrat in order to be relevant, in order to get votes, or in order to be popular, credible, or get your articles in the mainstream press, what have you accomplished? I mean, you denied your essence. You become like them. you've essentially betrayed your own identity. That's why I keep saying that we have to be true to ourselves. That's the only chance we have. And it's presumptuous to think that just because we've broken through and realized how good libertarianism is, that the American people can't do that. I mean, I'm no great, brilliant person. I saw the virtues of libertarianism. Why can't everybody do that? But in order for them to do that, you've got to make the libertarian case. If all you're doing is making the Republican light case or the Democrat light case, then you're not raising people's vision to what libertarianism is really all about.
Now, you mentioned foreign policy earlier, and I'll be completely honest with you. The first time I heard about your campaign was when we had Scott Horton on the show, and I thought we were going to talk about him joining the party, but he wanted to talk about you the entire time. So I'm like, oh, well, okay then. Well, we'll talk about Jacob Hornberger then. And then he started talking, because he's the foreign policy guy. Scott Horton is the foreign policy guy for libertarians. And if he's talking big on you, then that must mean you're rock solid when it comes to foreign policy, which is a big deal for us. Because I'm a vet, Ben's a vet, our other co-host Justin Hobbs, we're all vets. And so foreign policy is a very important issue to us. So how important is that an issue to you?
It's of supreme importance. It's been the greatest destroyer of liberty in our lifetime, in U.S. history. I mean, it's just phenomenal what it's done to our country. And I'm a veteran too. That there is the purpose of government. Okay, I'm a minarchist. I believe in limited government, and one of the functions of government is to protect the nation from an invasion. Well, there's no nation state that has even the remotest capability of invading the United States, of crossing the oceans with hundreds of thousands of transport ships and planes and millions of troops. Nobody's even got the money. They're broker than the U.S. government is. So all of this interventionism overseas is just totally unnecessary. And it creates the terrorist, the anger, the hatred that they then use as the excuse to take away our liberties here at home with the TSA searches and the Homeland Security, the secret surveillance, the assassination plots, including against Americans. So it has been the great destroyer in our lifetime of peace and prosperity, harmony, and liberty. So yeah, Scott Horton is my biggest fan. I mean, it's an honor. I mean, he's literally my greatest, most passionate supporter, and he helps me out tremendously. And we have lots of conversations on foreign policy because we're right on the same page that what we need to do is not do selective interventionism. We need to restore America's founding foreign policy of non-interventionism. Bring all the troops home. The philosophy is encapsulated in John Quincy Adams' 4th of July address in 1821 to the Congress. It was called In Search of Monsters to Destroy. It's worth reading. It's online. And Adams says it is not the role of the U.S. government to go abroad and to seek monsters to destroy. And he's referring to tyranny, oppression, famine, civil wars, revolutions, wars between other nations. The U.S. government's not going to get involved. And but at the same time, there was a system of open immigration that sent a message to the people of the world. If you can get out of the plight that you find yourself in, you can come to the United States, virtually no questions asked. Nobody's going to return you to your country of origin. So it was really a nice system. And it didn't involve going abroad and bombing people and stuff. That founding principle we need to restore, because this paradigm of foreign interventionism has proven to be an absolute disaster for America. We see that with Iraq, with Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, Latin America. It's just been a disaster. So instead of talking about reforming this system, we need to talk about replacing this system with a founding principle of non-interventionism and a limited government republic.
Okay, so I got a few comments from the, oh my goodness, where did it go? Got a few comments from the stream. Matthew Ryan says, 2 cities have legalized shrooms. A Democratic presidential candidate is talking about the position of legalizing all drugs. I believe he's talking about Tulsi Gabbard there. Now compare that to Ron Paul's 1988 campaign and how he was received. Carl Cramback says, at first I was thinking a libertarian socialist was someone who was for converting welfare to universal basic income, and then I found out it was something much, much worse. And Kyle Varner says, being too far outside the Overton window, make sure you stay out of power and accomplish nothing.
Yeah, but we've stayed out of power forever and accomplished, I mean, I don't want to even say nothing, but the Libertarian Party hasn't really accomplished a lot over the years. To Kyle's comment.
Yeah, and you can look at the drug war. I mean, when I started the Future of Freedom Foundation 30 years ago, which I should emphasize is not endorsing my campaign. I can't do that. If you mentioned legalizing drugs on a talk show, I mean, you could light up all the phones immediately. I mean, people are just so shocked, legalize drugs. And yet look at the progress we have made, both the Libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party. You have states legalizing marijuana. You have Democratic Party candidates calling for legalization of drugs. You have mainstream people. There's an organization of police officers or former police officers called LEAP that calls for the legalization of drugs. So this shows you the power of adhering to principle. I mean, what good does it do to get into office as a Republican light? You're not going to dismantle anything because you've gotten into office on a Republican-like platform of reform. Well, if you're not going to dismantle anything, then what good is it? Just what, political power? You get adulated and praised because you're a libertarian in public office? I mean, as Leonard Reed, the founder of the Foundation for Economic Education, once said, you're never going to fly higher in office than you flew getting there. Because if you go in there with a reform platform and you get into office and suddenly you say, I faked you guys out, I'm going to now dismantle these programs or vote to dismantle them, that's going to be the worst thing in the world for libertarianism and the Libertarian Party, because you're going to be accused of being a fraud and you're going to be kicked out in the next election and nobody's ever going to believe libertarians again. So we just have to stick with our principles. Look at Frederick Bastiat. I mean, Bastiat has been a tremendous influence on how probably every libertarian in the movement. And yet, you know, he won a seat in the parliament in France, but he didn't change France to a free market libertarian economy or society. I mean, nobody guarantees you success, but adhering to principle is, to me, everything. That way you remain true to yourself, you remain true to your movement, and it's the only chance to attract enough people that will reach this critical mass that will bring the shift. That's how we got things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, habeas corpus, due process of law. Small minority of people adhering to principle, and that starts attracting others until you finally reach a critical mass that brings a gigantic shift. And that's what we're shooting for. We're not shooting for a reformed welfare warfare state. We're shooting for a genuinely free society. That has been the goal of the Libertarian Party since it was formed in David Nolan's living room in Colorado in 1971. Getting people into public office is the means to achieve that free society, but it can only be done by adhering to principles.
All right, so I guess this will be the last question. Prior to your decision to join the race, we had all kinds of libertarian candidates already. We had radicals, we had reformists, we got Lincoln Chafee. Now I guess he's like the Bill Weld type running this election cycle. Well, the point is we already had a lot of candidates. What made you look at the current field of candidates and say, I can do better than they can?
Well, I didn't actually do that. I mean, I really just did a lot of self-thought and self-examination. I've been fighting for a free society for 3 decades in the educational arena. And I got to a point in my life where I said, you know, I've been writing against these people, Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, for all this time, my articles and books and presentations, conferences. I just said, I've got to a point in my life where I want to take them on more directly. And more directly means in the political arena. I mean, I would love to be running against Donald Trump and whoever the Democrats put up, Elizabeth Warren or Pete Buttigieg or Sanders or Biden, and hold their feet to the fire. The same thing I've been doing in the educational arena, but do it in the political arena. You know, they've been both waging this bigoted government program called the war on drugs. I consider it the most racially bigoted government program since segregation. They both support the socialism of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and farm subsidies, education grants. They both support the national security state and this paradigm of foreign interventionism. I want to hold them accountable. I want to challenge them. You see, they're just playing musical chairs because they both believe in the same systems. And so they just exchanging chairs periodically as to who's going to manage it. I want to challenge that joint paradigm. And so I thought to myself, well, do I want to do this? This is a major shift in the course of my life. But I said, yeah, I want to do this. And we got great candidates. I've seen them. I didn't know a lot of them before I got into the race, but I've gotten to know them. And let's face it, we're all on the same page as libertarians. And people just have to decide which one do they want to be their presidential spokesman. And so it's to me, I don't compare. It's just what I tell people is, look, if you want a candidate that you can go to sleep well at night, knowing that he's going to be telling people and explaining to people what you're fighting for, why you're fighting, why you donate your money and your time and your efforts to this party and this cause, then I'm your guy, because you can go sleep well at night knowing that I'm going to be presenting your philosophy in a clear, succinct, uncompromising way. Not only because it's right, but because it works. And that's an important thing that libertarians need to remember. Our philosophy is the only solution to the crises that Democrats and Republicans have put in immigration, healthcare, out of control spending, foreign policy. Ours is a philosophy that works. Freedom and free markets work, and they're also grounded in moral principles. And then we let that go, and then the delegates choose who they want to be the nominee among a cast of what I consider as very outstanding candidates.
So if someone wants to learn more about you and your campaign, or get involved or donate, how would they go about doing that?
Okay, everything's at jacobforliberty.com. I would invite people to come and see my blog page and see what I've been doing in the 2.5 months that I've been in this race. I've been operating on 2 levels. I've got the intra-party candidacy, where I'm going to state conventions just about every weekend. But in North Carolina, we're in the party primary there on Super Tuesday. The LP earned the right to be in the primary system. So there's going to be 16 Libertarian Party candidates, if you can believe that, on the ballot on Super Tuesday. Well, I've gone into North Carolina, and people can see that in my blog page, waging a very active campaign there. I've been going to gun shows, talking to people, giving out my campaign cards. I've also been targeting African Americans on the viciousness and bigotry of the drug war. And I just had an article written in the Carolinian newspaper in Raleigh. It's a black newspaper, by a reporter that said he's an ardent leftist. He's to the left of Barack Obama, but he's giving you serious consideration to voting for Jacob Hornberger because of my strong commitment to civil liberties and to ending this rotten criminal justice system that is based on the drug war. So that's a big achievement for me. I mean, it's just a huge honor that it's not a formal endorsement, but it comes as close to one as I can. So I'm reaching out to non-libertarians there, so people can come to my website and see that I've got a multi-part series of my campaign in North Carolina. I think I'm up to part 16 or something. And then all the appearances I'm making on podcasts like y'all show, other things. I just went on Judge Napolitano's show on Fox Nation. So all that's on the website. And we're getting a lot of volunteers, which is really exciting and gratifying for me. So people can volunteer on the website. And yeah, I need some financial assistance to get to all these state conventions. It costs like about $1,000 each one of these conventions. And I could sure use a hand with donations. So if people like what I'm doing, they can see at the blog section of my website, I'm putting people's money to good use. I mean, I've run a nonprofit foundation, and I've had to be very cautious on managing people's money. We keep our costs very low at FFF. We've got 3 of us in one small office. And that's what I'm doing with this campaign. I'm keeping my costs as low as possible. I'm running a low-cost guerrilla campaign, but I still need help waging that guerrilla campaign. And so I would invite people to come and donate if you can at jacobforliberty.com.
Great.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. Do you have something to say, Ben?
Oh, I was going to say, no matter what happens, I'd love to have you on the show again. Hopefully you get too busy to come to the show, but I mean, maybe when all this is over, we could have you on again, talk about anything you want.
I would love it. That would be a high quality problem that I've got so much I don't have time, but you guys are great. The thanks are mine for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure. And Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and we'll likely see each other in Iowa coming up at the end of February.
Yeah,
So thank you very much for coming on the show. Yeah, it'll be great. Yeah, well, maybe we can sit down with you and Jake at the same time.
That'd be awesome. That'd be a lot of fun. So looking forward to it.
All right, thank you for. Absolutely, it's been a pleasure. Good luck on your campaign, and I hope you do well. Remember, everybody, to like our Facebook page, get on Instagram and Twitter. We also have a YouTube channel, for those of you that don't know, that you can see all these videos go up on. So thank you, everybody, for watching. You have a good night. Goodbye, everybody.
Hey, Jacob, stick around